Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni recently reached a $0 settlement in their protracted legal battle. Additionally, her attorney spoke on a podcast to persuade listeners that losing $400 million was the original plan. "I'm not being dramatic at all. That's precisely what took place." Blake's lead attorney, Michael Gottlieb, sat there and stated that his client's money was never the main focus of this action. It was about exposing an underground smear machine and holding people accountable. Which is a pretty sophisticated way of indicating that we have abandoned our claims. "We need you to think that's what we wanted from the beginning, even though we don't get paid for." Megyn Kelly was not going to put up with it. Brian Friedman, Justin Baldwin's lawyer, wasn't either. Who showed up for that interview holding the genuine settlement document in his hands. The genuine thing, not a synopsis, a press release, or a well-crafted statement that has been vetted by both PR departments. And that document demonstrated that nearly all of the information Blake's side had been providing to the media regarding this settlement was untrue. The timing of all of this is really crucial, so allow me to take a moment to clarify. Blake Lively consented to leave everything 2 weeks before the start of the trial. No jury, no trial, no cross-examination, and no compensation for the $400 million claimant. That reversal is quite impressive. Brian Friedman stated that the decision was not made because everyone suddenly decided to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Avoiding the witness stand was the reason for the settlement. Blake would have had to endure Brian Friedman's cross-examination in that courtroom if there had been a trial. And I need you to comprehend the true meaning of that. This isn't just any old lawyer spending a couple hours lobbing softballs. Managing well-known witnesses has been the foundation of Brian Friedman's profession. And he would have questioned Blake under oath in front of a jury about every statement she had made during the previous 18 months, punishing her for lying. Every text message, email, and public comment that conflicted with the facts would have been presented in public court. It was evident that Blake's team did not want to take a chance on that situation. They chose to settle rather than confront that reality. Megyn Kelly enters the picture when they start portraying the deal as a victory right away. To reframe the entire situation, she presented footage of Michael Gottlieb working extra on a podcast. He spoke about taking responsibility, flashing a light, and defying the entire world. He did not discuss Blake's decision to abandon her primary cases. The $400 million simply disappeared from the discussion, and he made no mention of it. He did not provide an explanation for why someone who had supposedly been so severely harmed would accept to take nothing at all. Sitting there with Brian Friedman, Megyn Kelly described it as an attempt to make losing appear like winning. This is where things start to become very interesting, though. Brian Friedman discussed more than simply the compensation. He brought the document itself. He gave it to Megyn Kelly. He allowed her to read it aloud. And every rumor that had been circulating regarding covert payouts and covert admissions was totally refuted by what that paper contained. There was no money exchanged in the deal. Nothing from Justin, nothing from any of the defendants, and nothing at all. No covert payments were being made. Regarding Blake's allegations of mistreatment, Justin made no confessions of culpability. There are no gag restrictions compelling him to keep silent about anything. He is free to talk to anyone, at any time, about anything he wishes. For a settlement that Blake's group was attempting to portray as responsibility, it certainly lacked real responsibility. The document demonstrated that the story they had been promoting, that Justin was being held accountable for his actions, and that the settlement marked some sort of moral triumph, was wholly at odds with what the documents actually stated. Now, Megyn Kelly posed the query that, in my opinion, many people have been considering. Why would Blake accept nothing if her case was so compelling, if she had all this proof of abuse and retaliation, and if she was genuinely entitled to $400 million in damages? Why didn't she declare, "I'm not going to settle"? The explanation according to Brian Friedman, is that the case was never as strong as her team wanted everyone to believe. Let's go to trial. Let's put this in front of a jury and see what we can actually obtain. The information his team discovered in the weeks preceding the settlement essentially prevented them from moving forward. Allow me to share with you what transpired around Christmas 2024. Since the majority of people are unaware of this, Blake's crew had been providing information to the media for months, and a significant piece was set to appear in the New York Times. Rather than taking a vacation, Brian Friedman's team worked non-stop to gather their hard evidence because they anticipated the PR spin. Their plans were cancelled. They remained at the office and went through all of the correspondence they could locate. And what they found totally dismantled the narrative that the media was being fed. They discovered text messages that directly refuted the accusations and emojis that had been deleted from screenshots. Communications that presented a whole different image from Blake's. "Meet me in the trailer. I'm pumping," was one of the messages that directly contradicted her accusation of inappropriate behavior on set. The official narrative disintegrated more and more as they probed further. Blake Lively's accusations against Justin Baldoni were problematic since they were constantly evolving. The accusations were a movable goal from late 2023 to December 2024. Every time a claim was shown to be false, a brand new one would emerge to replace it. At first, workplace misconduct on the real movie set was the main source of contention. Blake emailed Wayfair Studios a list of 17 demands. And during the filming of delicate situations, such demands centered on things like intimacy coordinators and physical boundaries. She was now portraying herself as someone who was speaking out against improper conduct that had occurred throughout production. However, the complaint began to shift away from the actual set and toward allegations of a major smear campaign as the argument continued and the movie progressed into editing and promotion. Blake was now accusing Justin of orchestrating a multi-layered scheme to ruin her image as payback for her speaking out. She was no longer merely a victim of wrongdoing at work. An underground machine was set up to completely remove her from the industry. This shift was brought up by Brian Friedman throughout the interview since it is vital to comprehending what was actually taking place. Occasionally, it had to do with behavior at work. Occasionally, a smear campaign was involved. At times, it was about something completely else. For the full 18 months, it was a moving target. And as a result, it was almost hard for anyone to identify the real issue. The narrative would simply change and turn its attention to a new accusation whenever a particular claim was refuted by proof. It was like a serious accusation game of whack-a-mole. Blake's claims were constantly shifting when the evidence no longer supported the initial version, making it impossible to understand what he was really saying. Blake's team was compelled to continuously modify their arguments after the real receipts, text messages, and unedited discussions were made public since the evidence consistently refuted their earlier assertions. Let me now take you through one of the settlement document's most crucial sections. During the interview, Megyn Kelly made a point of emphasizing this. An agreement that permanently seals all future proceedings inside a single federal courtroom was signed by both sides. This is very important. It's typical for the losing party in major disputes to try to revive the allegations elsewhere. They might file in a separate state court. Perhaps they will file an appeal with a higher court in the hopes of getting a different result. Perhaps they will discover a procedural angle to try again. These things simply operate that way. People search for every opportunity to rekindle the conflict. However, all of those doors are shut by this settlement deal. Both parties agreed that the judge's federal courtroom is the exclusive location for any further proceedings pertaining to attorney fees. More significantly, the paper declares that Blake and Justin have fully renounced their ability to challenge the rulings. The battle is over once the judge determines the ultimate sum of money for the legal bills. No appeal, no restart, and no attempting in a different court. No one is able to reopen the doors because they are secured on both sides. This implies that Blake Lively cannot attempt to take these allegations to a different California court. The judge's decision to deny her damages cannot be appealed. She is unable to repeat the entire procedure in a different venue in the hopes of finding a more accommodating judge. Everyone proceeds with their lives when the judge determines the amount that will be paid. Even though Justin's side was relieved by the settlement, he still had a very tough time coming to that conclusion. His character and identity had been completely tarnished throughout the course of the 18-month conflict. He had very little power to defend himself while the matter was pending, and many had false beliefs about him. When the settlement was eventually put on the table, Brian Friedman described what it was like. Furthermore, it was by no means a celebratory moment. Justin was deeply disappointed. He believed that a formal jury trial would be his best chance to make things right. He desired a public setting where he could fully clear his identity and tell his true narrative while being shielded by a courtroom. He wanted a jury of his peers to hear him advocate for women and safe workplaces. It was a really difficult decision to give up that chance and the potential for a jury to formally clear his identity. He was leaving without making the formal admission that he had done nothing wrong. And when your reputation has been ruined by the media, it's difficult to accept that. However, the choice ultimately came down to what was most crucial for his family and his life. Proceeding with the trial meant that a media circus would continue for many more months. More rumors, more headlines, more inquiries into his private life. Justin put his family's calm and the end of the tumult first by accepting the settlement. The smaller dispute simply would not go away, even after the main settlement agreement was finalized in May. Adding up the precise amount of legal expenses Blake Lively was due for fighting against one dismissed defamation claim was the only significant problem that needed to be solved. This was meant to be an easy maths problem. You get a figure by looking at the billing records and figuring out how much was spent on that particular aspect of the case. However, it has turned into yet another messy delay. Blake's team was given a severe deadline of June 22 by the judge to provide all of their comprehensive billing records and justifications for the amount they are requesting. Her attorneys requested a significant extension in a letter to the court a few days prior to that deadline. They said that they might require up to 30 days to gather the pertinent arguments and billing information, which would delay things until mid-July. They cited a hectic schedule and juggling competing personal and professional obligations, such as travel abroad, as justifications. Due to their upcoming travels, elite solicitors, who have been charging millions of dollars in this case, now require a 1-month extension. The problem is that these solicitors will likely attempt to bill Justin Bolden's business for every hour they spend drafting letters requesting extensions. In any case, Blake's counsel is telling the judge that her summer is already reserved while purposefully dragging this out. What precisely did Blake receive if she received no damages? The attorney expenses have been cited by her team as their major victory. She was granted the opportunity by the court to recoup a portion of her legal costs, and this decision soon became the focal point of her post-settlement victory lap. This was presented by her solicitors as the true prize and the reason the entire lawsuit was worthwhile. However, Brian Freeman offered information that clarifies the true financial implications of this. Furthermore, it is not at all what her team is attempting to portray it as. Her entire multi-million-dollar legal expenditure will not be fully reimbursed by the awarded fees. The fee recovery is severely constrained by the judge's particular regulations. It only pays for the expenses she incurred protecting herself from a single, highly precise act of conduct. The $400 million countersuit Justin had brought against her for defamation. Before the court dismissed Justin's countersuit, it was only in effect for a few months. This indicates that Blake's attorney's direct defense against that particular claim only made up a relatively small portion of the time they spent on the case as a whole. But on Justin's side, things become much better. Before the teams really entered the costly stage of taking significant discovery depositions, this defense work took place. In a situation like this, the fees start to rise at an almost ridiculous rate after depositions begin. Justin's lawyer thinks the judge will order Justin to pay a relatively minimal sum because of how the timetable unfolded. A small amount that had nothing to do with the enormous amount Blake truly desired. Additionally, she was totally cut off from the millions her team most likely spent on the case. Blake Lively's team invoked California Civil Code Section 47.1 to initially get those restricted legal fees. In order to prevent victims from going bankrupt just for speaking the truth, this law, which is widely referred to as a statute designed to shield survivors from needless defamation lawsuits, and the regulation that requires the loser to pay attorney fees, was enacted. Additionally, Brian Friedman and Megyn Kelly both emphasized how absurd it was to apply this statute in this particular circumstance. This situation completely flipped the power dynamics that the law was intended to address. Blake Lively is not a regular employee. She is more than just a helper who lacks the means to defend herself. A legal battle wouldn't damage her finances. She is a wealthy Hollywood actress who is married to another affluent Hollywood actor who can afford to hire the most expensive solicitors in the world. The original intent of the act is entirely distorted when a law intended to protect the weak is used to demand compensation from an independent director. When you consider the actual power dynamics between the parties, this is a completely different situation, as stated by Brian Friedman. The timing of this interview was ideal since it coincided with a significant decision that the judge had made a few days prior. The parameters for the actual financial result were established by that Friday verdict. Blake was granted normal legal fees under the 47, the judge said. One law due to the dismissal of the defamation countersuit against her. Thus, that was a victory for her side in a limited sense. Here, however, the judge took a very firm stance and would not allow the costs to increase. Blake's counsel has requested a further award from the court, requesting that it be tripled in accordance with California law. They were attempting to use the entire fee collection process as a severe financial penalty for Justin. However, only the judge had the power to approve their pleas, and he decided to reject them outright. People have been saying this for a long time. Blake's solicitors were advocating for a huge win that was just not realistic. Brian Friedman took the time to explain precisely how the remaining fees will be determined, building on the judge's decision. Blake's entire campaign cost millions and millions of dollars, but Justin's company, Wayfarer Studios, is not being held accountable. She is not receiving full reimbursement for her fees. This isn't how it operates. Only the defense of the rejected defamation claim is linked to the financial obligation. Let me clarify what I mean by that. The millions she spent attempting to substantiate her initial allegations are not covered by the fees. Those assertions were dismissed. Claims for breach of contract that the judge dismissed before the settlement was reached, or that she largely rejected, are not covered by the fees. The months of depositions, discovery, and other activities that took up the majority of the case are not covered by the fees. The work her solicitors undertook particularly to fight against Justin's lone defamation cross-claim is the only item covered. The extent of the fees is rather limited because that particular cross-claim constituted a very minor portion of the entire action. It doesn't even come close to the winning lap her team has been performing when you compare what is covered to what they spent. No amount of PR spin can alter the facts are the facts. Blake cannot take this settlement agreement and claim she wants to change any of the terms, such as punitive damages, or anything else she first requested. The doors are shut for good. Many were genuinely taken aback by Brian Friedman's professional tone at the end of the interview. He made it very clear that neither he nor Justin Baldoni is attempting to boast or celebrate some brutal win over Blake Lively, despite the fact that this 18-month conflict was personal and emotional for all parties involved. Destroying the opposing side was never the goal of any of this. Never about exacting retribution or ensuring she never worked again. Absolute finality was the main goal of accepting the deal. That was always the primary goal. Justin had spent a great deal of time and money on this case. By all accounts, It Ends With Us was a popular movie that resonated with viewers, but it had eclipsed its true success. It caused harm to innocent persons who were caught in the crossfire, such as team members who were merely carrying out their duties when they unexpectedly found themselves at the epicenter of a significant public conflict unrelated to them. The arrangement fulfilled its purpose by permanently securing the case in that settlement. It made it possible for Justin to leave the incident entirely unscathed. Without having to worry about this litigation all the time, he could finally concentrate on his wife and kids. What Brian Friedman had been stating all along was confirmed by the settlement document he sent Megyn Kelly. There were no gag orders, no admissions of guilt, no secret payouts, and no stipulations that would in any way support Blake's initial assertions. Just a clean break, no money exchanged, and an end to a lawsuit that should never have been brought in the first place. Before we continue, please click the subscribe button and join us at Pretty Loud if you're enjoying this breakdown. Every week, we delve into these legal disputes involving celebrities. Additionally, you don't want to miss what will happen next. Let's get back to the story. The settlement itself isn't the only thing that makes this whole situation so illuminating. It is the culmination of 18 months of changing tales. When you examine the entire time frame, a pattern that is very difficult to deny becomes apparent. Blake Lively began with allegations of workplace misbehavior that was centered on particular on-set behaviors. The attention moved to an alleged smear campaign when those charges began to encounter evidentiary issues. When the narrative of the smear campaign began to crumble under investigation, attention once more turned to media manipulation and reputational harm. A fresh version of the narrative seemed to emerge whenever the facts caught up with one version. It was exactly what Brian Friedman characterized as a moving target. You are unable to defend yourself against accusations that are constantly evolving each time you offer refutations. During that Christmas 2024 work marathon, his team discovered text conversations that directly contradicted the official narrative, which made them more harmful. Screenshots with messages like "Meet me in the caravan" had their emojis erased. That implied a whole different dynamic than the accusations. Conversations that, as opposed to the adversarial setting Blake described, depicted a professional working relationship. The plot had to change each time one of these signals was revealed, and finally the changes were too noticeable to ignore. Around that same time, an article appeared in the New York Times that was meant to be the definitive description of Blake's experience, the piece that would solidify the story and significantly shift public opinion in her favor. Rather, it turned into the start of the end. Because they had spent the holidays preparing their answer, Brian Friedman's team was prepared. They anticipated the article. They had the receipts to refute nearly every significant claim, and they knew what it would contain. Blake's account of what happened was mostly relied upon in the article, although the real evidence presented a different picture. And as soon as that evidence became public, the case's entire basis started to fall apart. There was no mutual agreement between the two sides to bury the hatchet in the settlement that ensued. When the legal team realized their argument would not stand up in court, they made a calculated retreat. Blake Lively has two options. Confront Brian Friedman's cross-examination in public, with all the evidence presented for the jury to see, or leave the case with no money and attempt to portray it as a moral triumph. Michael Gatortle, her attorney, has been trying to persuade people that losing $400 million was actually the plan since she opted for a different course of action. The truth is revealed in the settlement document itself. No money, no admissions, no gag orders, no appeals, no do-overs, just a final resolution to a case that took millions of dollars, 18 months, and a great deal of public attention. All of this led to Justin Baldoni being in the exact same position he had been in from the beginning, free to talk about his experience, innocent of the accusations, and at last allowed to move on with his life. The remaining contested attorney fees are really a footnote, a minor financial computation that the judge will ultimately decide. And the amount that results from that procedure will be minuscule compared to the amount Blake's team spent attempting to substantiate assertions that ultimately failed. The case is closed, the doors are sealed, and it is evident from the invoices. Brian Friedman informed Megyn Kelly that Blake Lively only took the